Okay, so we're here. We're going to talk about all kinds of things before an IEP and during an IEP meeting, and as both understood editors
and moms who have been to so many IEP meetings.
Right, we've got a lot to say about this topic, and I think a lot of information and tips that we can offer, and hopefully other parents, even if they only pick up on a couple of them, they'll be able to use them to make the IEP meeting easier
and less stressful, because that's the part that's like so hard as a parent. Is it's stressful. Having been a teacher, I know it's stressful on the other side, but as a parent, it's really different. It's really much tougher, and you don't always know what you're going in for.
Right, and you bring a lot of stuff of your own into that meeting. You know,
it's emotional. It's really
emotional.
Hard. It's really tough.
Let's talk a little bit about preparing, because obviously the more prepared you can be as a parent, and you're going into something, if it's your first time, that you don't even know what to expect is going to happen.
It's funny because even having been a teacher, when I did my first IEP meeting as a parent, I didn't know what to expect, and I was so underprepared.
Really?
Yeah, I didn't look at all the reports as I should have ahead of time. I didn't know what questions to ask. I didn't know that I could talk, right? And I think that a lot of parents feel that way, and we don't have it all together.
Totally was like mute, because I just didn't know what anybody was going to say, let alone what I was going to say and what I should say.
And whether you're going to be emotional and whether that's taken wrong.
I think as prepared as you are going in there, if it's your first time, you have to know that it's okay
to not feel like you know what you're doing?
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, you're just not going to be 100% in the driver's seat.
You walk in the room and you feel like I'm the only one who doesn't know what's going on, you know, and it's so overwhelming. At this point, I always bring my husband always comes too.
Yep. That was so important to me, to line up people in advance who are going to come and not only advocate for your child,
but support you, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And to be there to be a second set of eyes and ears, because especially when you're like emotional and you're going in with your parent, you know, hat,
right?
Yeah, heart. Right, that to have somebody else there who can even step back a little bit and hear everything, including the stuff you may not be able to hear.
And for me, it's really helpful because I do more of I watch people's faces and I'm watching what they look like when they say things, and sometimes I miss what they're saying because I'm sort of trying to scrutinize what are they thinking, what are they not saying, and what are those kinds of things, and I'm lost in the weeds.
Right.
And so my husband will take notes and we'll go back afterwards and he'll say, you may have missed that this person said this great thing. And I'd be like, yeah, because I was watching this other person make a face that probably meant nothing.
Right.
But I was
trying to read everything.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, not only a spouse or a family member, sometimes, you know, if you can bring a friend, you can bring someone, and, you know, I'm sure you know other people who've been through this before. Yeah. And if you can just say, can you come with me and be another pair of ears and help me translate it?
Yeah. And it's good. It's always, this is to your point about that. If it's not a spouse or a family member or something like that, it's always a good idea to let the school know ahead of time that the person's coming with you.
Yes.
Because you don't want to take them off guard. You don't want the school to be surprised that you walk in the door with somebody that they don't know or expect.
The more you know about who's going to be around that table, the less surprised you're going to be.
That's such a good point. I'm so glad you said that, because that meeting invite that comes, the prior written notice, it should have on there all of the I was just talking to somebody about this the other day, that they wanted to know who was going to be at an IEP meeting. And what I said is, oh, did you get your meeting invite, your prior written notice? And she said, yes. And I said, look at the bottom of it, and it has all of the invitees on it, and it should have their role. So it should say, you know, special ed teachers, speech language therapist, all of those kinds of things. And then you can get a better sense of who's going to be around the table and what their role is, and
Right, because you don't always know.
Yeah.
It's like if the school psychologist is there, and why? Why is the school
Right.
psychologist there? And I think if you look at that list of who's going to be joining you, you also get a sense of when you walk in the room, there's going to be this number of people.
Right.
You're often, sitting at a not huge table, and when you walk in and there's 5 or 6 people waiting for you, it immediately can be sort of daunting and throw you off.
Embarrassingly enough, what I wish I'd known was that I could even ask for the report in advance. Because, and as an expert, I know that you have 3 days. Like, you should have it at least 3 days before the meeting. I didn't know that, so I went in cold.
Yeah, me neither.
My first meeting, I went in cold, and I'm trying to read this report at the same time. I wish I'd known to ask for it ahead of time.
Yes.
To go through it and sort of highlight the things that didn't make sense to me, right?
Yes.
Which, of course, then would have been the whole report. I would have highlighted the whole thing. But to go through and highlight the things that didn't make sense to me so I could ask about them.
Right.
Right.
And I mean, for me, see, I didn't know that I was supposed to get it 3 days in advance. So it came at the last minute. So already, I'm dealing with the stress of, I don't know what this is, and tomorrow I'm supposed to talk about it. But I think that, to your point, to be able to go through it, knowing you're not going to understand everything because it's, kind of gobbledygook, to be able to write down literally on the report, because it's okay to do that, that's your copy, questions as you read. And if the report is littered with notes from you, great.
I use like sticky flags. Do you know, like a sticky note flags? And I'll put it at a certain part in the report. The other thing that I always do now is I go to the end of the report first, because it has the summary of all the stuff, right? So you've seen those now. It has the summary, so it's a little less overwhelming for me to start at the end and see what the summary is, what it all means, and what the recommendations are.
Right.
And then I can go backwards and look at all of the stuff that brought it to that summary.
Yes. As somebody who jumps to the end of the book because I want to know how it ends.
That's the editor in you, I think.
Right. I think, that is just terrific advice, because that's written in, sort of normal people speak.
Right.
So at least you're understanding at the end of the day what they're seeing in the report, what they think is going on and that needs to be done.
And that's actually an important point too. This is really interesting. I didn't know this for a while, but there should always be recommendations. And so the recommendations are, what does this look like in the classroom? What can we put into place? What supports? What can we do? And sometimes it's recommendations for parents too. Like, this is a great book that this parent should read to get more involved in understanding the learning intention issue component. But there should always be recommendations. So if there aren't, I've gotten braver about calling and asking for the report to be amended with recommendations.
Right, so it comes ready with the stuff at the end that really puts it into perspective.
Right.
And makes sense of all the numbers and the scores and the, relativities or whatever, those numbers.
I don't know about you, but for me, it took a long time to realize, those numbers weren't my children, right?
Yeah, yes.
That's so, I'm choked up thinking about that. You look at this paper and it tells you all these things your child's not able to do.
Yes.
And it's so hard to remember all the things that they're able to do, because you're looking at this going, oh my gosh, this is all they're seeing.
Right. Oh, it looks awful.
Yeah.
But my kid is this and my kid is this, and,
So
my kid's great.
So I write that on the bottom of the report now, right? I write those things for me, if for nobody else, to write, he's a great sense of humor, or everything about cars that you'd want to know, and you can use that as an in or something like that.
I think that's great. That's like a real bolster for parents to know, whether or not I can even convey this by the time we're through with this, I can know it, and I can feel like, okay, I've dealt with the stuff that, doesn't feel so good.
Right.
And go back to the place where I'm going to put that in perspective, because my kid is great And we're talking about weaknesses. We're not talking about like defining your child.
Right. And I think that's really important too. Is
Me
that,
too.
That it's so hard to get out of that place of thinking that a diagnosis equals your child, and to be able to look at that report and take a deep breath and realize this is what we're using to make sure he's getting what he needs. There are things in the report, and I have been known many a time to say, whoa, 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 hold up. I don't understand what you just said.
Right.
Can you explain that in, actually my phrase usually is, can you explain that to me like I'm a 5-year-old? Because I need to hear it in like plainer language.
That's funny you say that. I usually say, can you translate that into baby talk? Because that's the only way I'm going to understand it all.
Right.
And I think that's important too, because it reminds them that while they may have had, 20 IEP meetings that week, this is your IEP meeting.
I sat around IEP tables as a teacher, and there were things I didn't understand. I was always so grateful when there was a parent who would ask, because I didn't want to admit as a teacher that I didn't understand what was going on. So when a parent asked that question, I was like, oh, phew, I didn't know that either. So it's such a relief that the parent asked. I think it's important for parents to know that sometimes you're going to open your mouth and not say what you thought was going to come out. Yeah. I don't know if you've had that happen, but I've had moments where I open my mouth and I think I'm going to say something and I burst into tears.
Oh, yes.
Or I open my mouth and I say, does anyone like my child? And it's ridiculous because I know they do. It's just looking at the reports, it doesn't feel that way.
Right. You need a little reassurance from somebody.
And I think it's okay to walk that back. I mean, I know I've said, I'm so sorry, I didn't know that was going to happen. I didn't know I was going to cry. I didn't know I was going to ask a question that's ridiculous. So it's okay to be able to be human in these meetings. The fact that we both are editors for Understood, but also have done this as parents,
Right.
What are the odds of that, right?
Yes, exactly. And, we're sitting here doing this, now, but we've done it so many times over the years that we've worked together.
We've called each other on the phone and had little conversations where there are,
right.
Gail, I have a meeting and I really just need an ear.
Right, exactly. I mean, how convenient for us that we've got each other right there. But, I think when you recognize that there are people to go to ahead of time who can share their tips and their experience, so you can get a little out of, out of that in real, what happens in real time.
And the thing that's hard about that, but is really important, is it's like you have to start talking about it.